Welcome back to the next episode of the Sensible Mama podcast. I am Paulina Westcott, your host, and joining me today is Kara. She is working on her certification and training to become a doula, which is super exciting. Kara, tell us about yourself and what you do, and then we'll dive into your birth story in just a moment.
Sure, sounds good. Hi. I have a really interesting story and kind of why I got into wanting to become a doula. But I used to be a music teacher. I taught music for 7 years. And then I got pregnant with my son. I actually got injured, and then I left teaching because I couldn't really do it anymore at the time, like physically. But also was kind of feeling like I'm not so sure that this was actually what I wanted to do, being in public schools. And so I turned to nonprofit work. That's where I am right now. I think I have a really strong pull to be wanting to make a difference in other people's lives, like really making a difference. So teaching nonprofit work. And I spent about a year and a half in the nonprofit world right now. And I have been feeling like this is just not it either. It's hard to kind of find your way when there's so much focus on a lot of like the STEM, right? So we're really focused on that. And so eventually, really just in the past maybe month or so, I've come to the conclusion that I wanted to become a doula, but I've really I dove in head first and I'm ready. I'm like en route. I know when my certification is happening. It's all coming together. And so I thought about it actually before I had my son, because I was working with a doula during my pregnancy and birth and everything. And then it kind of like let it go. But I had written it down at one point because I came back to it a couple of months ago and I saw it in a journal somewhere and I saw this whole thing written out about how, oh, I want to do this for women and this. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are such great ideas. And I had totally forgotten that I even wrote them down at some point. And then I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Like I knew a couple weeks ago, I guess, I wanted to work with women, with postpartum birthing people, I should say. And then it was like, okay, that clicked everything into place. And now I'm thinking about maybe being full spectrum. It's like there's so many opportunities within the doula world.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of offerings that I can add on to it and things, and it's very exciting. So yeah, I'm excited for this next stage.
That is really awesome. It's funny because the call it the birthing world, whatever the name is, midwives and doulas and everybody that is involved in the birth of a baby, right? Like that is such a huge part of life. It's so unlike anything else. It's not like any other kind of business. It's not like, working at a computer. I also had like a strange trajectory to where I am now, where, I was in software and then I was in sales and in marketing, and I've been a manager and I've worked in a corporate setting and whatever. And it's all been great. I mean, it's all led me to where I am now, right? But when you kind of enter the world of birth, if it's right for you, it just kind of like clicks and you're like, this is magical. This is where it's at. Like there's something just magical. I don't know what other word to use. It's magical.
I agree. And it always boggles my mind that, almost half the population goes through this kind of shared experience, and we just don't learn a whole lot about it when we're younger, And so it really takes either knowing people who are in that world or, coming to it on your own after you've given birth or maybe another way, but it takes that kind of experience to get there. So
yeah,
I really did though.
My hope with this whole Sensible Mama project is I can find a mama out there who's like considering something, whether it's home birth or not. I actually don't even care. Like I'm not, I thought at the beginning, I thought that the whole purpose of my project was to advocate for home birth. But the more I'm getting into it, the more I'm like, it's not for everybody. And that's totally okay. Like for me, it was the perfect choice and I have no regrets about my home birth. But for somebody else, even if they're totally like low risk and everything is perfect, home birth is just not the option for everybody. But what is, I think, what every mama should have is the ability to advocate for themselves regardless of the setting, regardless of how your birth unfolds. Mm-hmm. You should be in the driver's seat, and you should know and you should feel like you're in the driver's seat, that birth and labor and pregnancy isn't something that's being like done at you. It's something
Right.
that you're leading and that you are in control of as much as you can be. Obviously, crazy things happen, and birth is wild and in some ways very unpredictable, and that is what it is. But as much as is possible, like, you should feel like you're in control, and you shouldn't feel hopeless or lost or apathetic or any of these other like misemotions about it, you know? So that's
I
where
totally agree, and I guess to tangent somewhat, but I felt even like during my pregnancy, like I just wanted to kind of like soak up as much information as I could because I really wanted to be as informed as possible going into my birth because it's something you've never done before. And you know, you're told it's natural and it's, you know, your bodies are made for this, but still you're like, okay, but how do I know what to do? How do I prepare? And so I took some evidence-based birth classes. That was what I had gone with for my childbirth education. And I was so, so, so glad I did because they just kind of walked you through they walked you through everything. They walked you through what a natural birth can look like. I think they talked about some home birth stuff. They talked about all the evidence for all the interventions and, you know, what you can say no to, and which is just about everything. And why you might want to say no to some things, and maybe why you might not want to say no. So they were all encompassing, and I felt so like empowered and confident and just educated going into it. And I think that that really, really made a difference for me. That paired with having a doula who I could, you know, lean on for education, but also like ended up like during hard labor being a really big support. Finding a midwife who was super supportive of me, having a husband who was super supportive of me, and then just like icing on the cake was I gave birth at Manchester Memorial, which is a super progressive hospital. They are just wonderful, and they work right with the midwives, and yeah, it couldn't have all lined up any more perfect than it did. But I think that that kind of planning and prepping and making sure like you understand what it's really all about is so important, so you're not feeling surprised by things as they come, and you still might, as I sort of.
yeah. I mean, even with Mia, I had a home birth with a midwife. I kind of accidentally had a doula. My midwife's birth assistant is trained as a doula, but she was there in the capacity of a birth assistant. But there was a moment in my birth where she was like, "All right, doula hat on. Here's
Right.
what you need to do."
Yeah.
um, but even with all of that, it was still challenging. Like, it wasn't a walk in the park. It was still. I was very grateful, like you said. Like, I was very grateful that I had, and I hadn't even done as much education as I've done since. You know, now that I'm kind of here doing this topic as a you know, as a daily thing. But like you said, I also did a doula led childbirth education class, which
Mm.
similarly was very. It made me realize that like it's not just you sit there and wait for somebody to tell you what to do, which is kind of, I guess, the natural. I don't know if it's Hollywood or society or why it is that we think that that's how it goes, you know, but like, you actually have so much power
Mhm.
in childbirth, regardless of where you are. Like you said, like, you can say no to just about everything, if not everything. If you're not happy with how something is going, like, you're allowed to, and not only you're allowed to, but I feel you have an obligation to yourself and to your baby to advocate for yourself and be like, this doesn't seem right. This goes against my gut instincts. Teach me more about why. You know, there's very few emergencies that have to be handled right in that moment.
Mhm.
Even most emergencies, you have a little bit of time to think about, okay, what are my alternative choices? What happens if I wait? What happens if I do nothing? What other choices do I have? Can I talk to a different doctor? I don't like your attitude, OB. Get out of here. I want to talk to, like, all these things are totally legal things to say, you know? And I didn't know that. I was like, huh, okay, so it's my birth. It's mine, you know? It's not the doctors, it's not the hospitals, it's not the midwives or my husband's. It's mine and my baby's. And we're the ones that are gonna run it because it's ours, you know?
Yeah, and they even in that class went so far as to say, like, if they give you an informed consent form, you can cross things out and you can rewrite it. And I was like, what? I had no idea, which is just amazing. And again, so empowering. And, what you were saying about just like being able to say no to doctors, that's another really good reason to have a doula. Because like if you were in a setting like a hospital, um, and you had a doctor who wasn't listening to you or giving you the things that you wanted in your own birth, then a doula can kind of step up and be that advocate for you.
Mhm.
Luckily, I didn't need that for where I was and the preparations that I had done, but it's really a useful thing to have if you're going to be
Absolutely. And
birthing.
not only, I would say it even starts when you're just pregnant. Like if you go to an
Mhm.
OB appointment, you know, toward the beginning, they're very, very boring. You pee in a cup, they check your blood pressure, they ask if you have any questions, they measure your belly, and that's about it, right?
Right.
And usually, in my experience in talking to mamas, typically, um, the red flags, if there are any, tend to show up a little bit later in the pregnancy. So, if something is measuring off or whatever, there's tests. You can decline any tests you like. There are some that, in my opinion, you should take. But like, hey, you, do your research, figure it out for yourself, or maybe you get, later into pregnancy and they're like, we want to induce you early. That was my thing. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And they were like, well, it's just what we do. And I had this moment where I was like, it's what you do, but it's not what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? And there's something very powerful about knowing what a red flag is, because it's not going to be the same for everybody too, like if something is just not jiving, ask more questions. And it's not to say like, I'm of the opinion that most OBs, most midwives are not evil. They're not there to like, they're not out to get you. They're just doing their job, and they're doing it to the best of their ability within their scope of training and their whatever, their experience. And you are one of many, people that is going through birth for them, but your birth is the only birth that you're experiencing at that time. So
Right.
the perspective is very different, and you have to realize that. So you say, hey, I'm not down with what's happening. Please explain to me why this is being done. Or I disagree with this. What other choices do I have? Like, and then if they really, really push and they're not willing to bend and work with you, find a new provider.
Yeah. I agree. And so before I even got pregnant, I was seeing an OB for years, actually. I really liked her. And then as I was like, okay, like we want to get pregnant, like what can I do? Like, and I have a history of breast cancer in my family. So I said, I told her about this and I said, I'd love to get tested for anything like genetically or whatever. And it's not just breast cancer, there's a lot of cancers in my family. And she was just like, oh no, like that only happens if, something goes wrong. And I'm like, wait, so we're gonna wait to see if something goes wrong and then, like, so I could, like, go months and months being stressed out about, you know what I mean? Like, there's just not, it just didn't feel right at the time. And again, after years of seeing her, and I really liked her, but after that exchange, I was like, I think I need to find somebody else. And
Yeah.
that's when I found out about midwives. First of all, I didn't even know they were a thing. I thought they were from, like, the 1800s. Like literally. And I was referred over to With Women Wellness. Like so many people were like, they are incredible. And they really were, because I never felt that I was just totally dismissed. I never felt dismissed at all. Like always felt like they always had an answer for my questions. And I asked a lot of questions. And they always had evidence and research to back it up, and that's me, because I like that kind of like, okay, we're pulling from research, we're pulling from all these, like, they're all their experiences, of course, and they just always made me feel good when I was talking to them. So yeah, finding a provider, even, I mean, you can find a new provider up until the end of your pregnancy, and I think that's so important to know also, that you can find a new provider at any time. You can go to the hospital and say, hey, I'm here, I'm having a baby, and they'll give you a provider. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be set in stone from the beginning. But I was lucky to have found somebody that I really liked from the beginning.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, if you're willing, I would love for you to tell us your birth story.
Absolutely. So my due date was January 1st, 2023. My kind of overall goal was to have a natural water birth with minimal interventions. I had sort of like a beautiful, idealistic fantasy in my head. But I also loved it because, like with our evidence-based birth classes, we made a birth board, and I was able to put all these really nice pictures all together, and I actually still have that birth board. So I just had this like amazing image in my head. Um, and I just wanted to kind of give a disclaimer that, I'm remembering things as well as I can. Some of the details might not be spot on, but I'm kind of saying it to the most accurate of my ability that I can.
Fine. Labor brain is definitely a phenomenon where like time changes, your sense of reality shifts at different points in labor. So like,
Big time.
yeah.
So my pregnancy was fairly easy. I had no major complications or anything aside from falling when I was 13 weeks pregnant. Like I said, it resulted in a herniated disc. I had to leave my teaching job. So that was a big thing, but baby was fine. And eventually, I was fine after the pregnancy. Just took a lot of physical therapy. And I couldn't work during my pregnancy, so I was kind of home all the time, just relaxing, honestly. I had a really nice, peaceful, relaxing pregnancy for the most part, which is not something that most people can say. I hear a lot of people are stressed out and, leading all the way up to it. But all of my checkups were regular and normal, and everything was good until 38 weeks, when I went for my regular checkup with the midwives, and I randomly had high blood pressure. They call it gestational hypertension. And they were like, well, do you think, is there anything that you think could have caused this? And I literally, to this day, swear that it was from me baking Christmas cookies. Because I think I cooked 12 different varieties of Christmas cookies, and I just so badly wanted them all ready for everybody who had helped me throughout my pregnancy, and I was just stressing myself out getting all these cookies done before I gave birth. So they're like, okay, well, maybe don't do that anymore. They're like, go home, kind of try to relax for the next 2 days, come back in 2 days. And that would have been on Wednesday. So I was going to come back on Friday, which was December 23rd. So I came back on Friday, and I still had high blood pressure, which, you're sent home and told to relax. Doesn't really make for a relaxing couple of days. And I said, okay, well, what do we do? What's the next step? And they said, well, you have to get induced. And I'm like, wait, what? I don't know about this. It just felt like, okay, I didn't ask on the Wednesday for some reason, what would be the next step. I think I was just freaked out that it was happening. She just had to explain to me that in this case with hypertension, there are some pretty serious issues that can happen for both the baby and the mom. So after she explained a couple of things to me, I'm like, okay, I think that this is the best option. We need to get him out. But it never felt like you need to get in now and you need to get him out tonight. It was never like that. It was like, we need to do this for safety, but we're still gonna let you go in and have, the birth that you need to have so that you're not stressed and baby's not stressed. And so I basically had 4 hours to go home, pack. We went to Target and got some snacks. We called my mother-in-law and had her come down to watch our dogs. We just had that little bit of time to go home and get everything ready, call our family and let them know, and then we drove to the hospital for 7 p.m. We got there and everyone was all happy, which I was so glad about, because I didn't know, Christmas weekend, are people going to be upset that they're there? Everybody was incredible. Loved all the nurses who were there. They got me in my gown, they gave me an IV port, which took me 5 tries to find the blood vessel. Which thinking back on it, I'm like, okay, well, I had hypertension. My blood vessels were probably So they called in a specialist, and they put a heating pack on me and to expand and finally get it in. So I'm like, okay, well, that was a little bit stressful, but okay, we're in, we're good. We're, good to go. So I'd say by 7:30, they were ready to go right when we got there, pretty much. 7:30 ish was when they came in and talked to me about okay, your first intervention, you have a choice, basically. I could have done the Foley bulb, which is the balloon, right, that's inserted into the cervix, and it helps it to start dilating and start contractions. I could do a prostaglandin, which is a dissolvable tablet that, in my case, they put in my mouth. It would ripen the cervix and stimulate the contractions also, or I could do Pitocin, which is the synthetic oxytocin to stimulate uterine contractions. I knew I did not want Pitocin, or really any meds if possible. And I remembered pretty vividly talking about the Foley bulb. I'm just going to call it the balloon because that's what is in my mind. From the evidence-based birth classes, and I was like, okay, that, like, I remember, because I was like, whoa, I never knew this was a thing. And I remember it's like there really aren't like too many things that can go wrong with it, and okay, we're gonna go with the Foley bulb. And so I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good, right? Like they put it in, it was a little uncomfortable, but nothing too bad. The cervical check was way worse for me. Um, and I felt kind of like, okay, this is it. They're gonna start it, and my baby's gonna come. That didn't happen. It barely worked. It fell out early. I think it can be in there for up to like 12 hours inflating, and it only did it for like an hour. It got my cervix dilated to like 3 centimeters at most, and then once it fell out, it went back down to 2. So like it was like, no, just didn't work. And so I felt a little defeated, but I'm like, okay, I guess like, we're gonna have to try something else and see if it can work. So, like I said, that was probably only about an hour. So maybe like 8:39 on Friday, my midwife came in and said, okay, now we have to, decide between prostaglandin or Pitocin. And I'm like, well, once again, I want neither, but I really don't want Pitocin. So I went with the prostaglandin, and I did at that point text my doula, because she wasn't there yet. She was like, when you feel like you need me, call me in. And at that point, I was like, okay, we're good. I think we either texted or called her, and we were like, what is the prostaglandin? I didn't remember learning about it, and she kind of made me feel better about it. And I'm like, okay, so we'll do the prostaglandin. It's not Pitocin. So I took one, and then 4 hours later I took another, and 4 hours later I took another, and I think I took about 5 rounds of the prostaglandin. And of course it was a low dose. They didn't, pump it into me or anything, but it was like the lowest dosage that could happen. Wasn't really feeling contractions. Was able to sleep much of the night, which was good. And I got up to 5 centimeters dilated at some point on Saturday while taking the prostaglandin. And I stayed there for a really long time. And it was funny because I remember a nurse coming in and being like, wow, you're 5 centimeters. You're doing great. When I was 5 centimeters, I was screaming. And I'm like, that's so weird because I'm not like feeling anything. Like it was just so strange. It was like, I just kept saying my son was just not ready to come out. Like he was just like, please, I just need to stay in here for a little longer. And to this day, he's nothing if not stubborn. So totally get it now. So that day, Saturday, I did everything I could to get it moving. I was bouncing on a yoga ball. I was walking, dancing, eating dates, did acupressure, did everything in the book of, natural remedies to try and get contractions started and get the baby moving. I had a great time. Hanging with the nurses and listening to music and being with my husband. And it was so fun, but nothing was happening for the entire day, basically.
Man.
So, about 6 p.m. on Saturday, the midwife came in again to tell me, like, okay, we've been here a really long time, and I think it's time to try something else. And she said, it's either going to be Pitocin or breaking my water. And breaking my water, the only thing I remembered from the birth class was that, like, we just don't want the baby's head against the pelvic bone for too long. That's like all I remember. So I'm like, okay, well, like with Pitocin, like I was like, well, I really want to have this water birth still, right? Like I'm like fixated on my goal. And they're like, oh, well, we have a wireless monitor that's waterproof. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so like I'm talking to my husband, I'm talking to my doula. I remember like being in tears, being like, I don't want either of these. I just want my baby to come out naturally. But I knew like it just wasn't going to happen based on the fact that we've tried 2 different things already, and it's just it would have been, I would have been there for probably 2 more weeks if I tried to let it go naturally. So I ended up saying, okay, let's do the Pitocin. Like I was like, can we do like the lowest level? They're like, yep, we're just going to do like, I don't remember what the dosage was, but the lowest level of Pitocin. Okay. So, and I asked, like, can I get in the tub now, like with Pitocin? They're like, you know what, let's give it a little bit of time. We just don't want it to slow anything down, right? Because the water can slow things down sometimes. So they gave me the Pitocin. I felt the contractions a little bit more, but I was still at 5 centimeters, like for a long time. I walked around a bunch. I did a lot of breathing, and they upped my Pitocin level like 2 or 3 times, and like was sort of feeling it a little bit more, not really. At midnight, they upped it the last time, and I was like, okay, but I really want to get in the tub. They're like, okay, great, we'll get you in the tub. And I'm just like chilling in the tub at midnight, like, woohoo, I'm feeling great, you know. But I shouldn't have been, right? At this point, I should be feeling like there is something happening in my body, and it just wasn't happening. I had an ice pop. They told me not to eat anything else. um, and so I just kind of hung out in the tub for a little while. They kept coming in to check on me, and they're like, all right, well, it's still not happening. Let's get out of the tub. And so they took me out of the tub. They brought me back into my room. And around 3 a.m. on Sunday, this was Christmas morning, the midwife came in and she's like, okay, I think we have to try breaking your water. And I'm nervous because I don't know what's going to happen. And again, all I know about breaking water is like, oh, we just don't want the baby's head against the pelvis for too long because that can be bad. And I'm like, okay, well, what if like he doesn't come out still? You know what I mean? But they talked to me, and we called my doula, and she was like, I really think that it's going to help, and it's not like dangerous for the baby or anything. Because I think that was the other thing. I was like, wait, you're going to like manually pop it? Like what? So eventually we came to the conclusion, okay, let's let them break my water, and here I am on my 4th intervention, wanting no intervention.
Right.
But again, knowing like, okay, in this scenario, the baby needs to come out, right? So I just, they popped it, and I remember how warm it was. I don't know how your water breaking was, but because they did it manually, it all came out at once, and it was like a bath. Like I was like, whoa, so surprised about that. And they set me up to kind of sleep in bed with a peanut ball between my legs because I think the baby was too far to the right, so they wanted to like get me in the right position. And they said, call us if it gets really painful. And I'm like, okay. And I closed my eyes. And maybe 30 minutes later, I'm like, Andrew, you need to go get them right now. Like it just set everything into motion. It was so I could feel the contractions immediately, and apparently having Pitocin makes contractions worse, which I didn't know. That's the part of Pitocin that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so like I was starting to really feel the pain. They came in, they checked me. They're like, okay, you're 7 centimeters dilated. And so I'm saying that they checked me. They always asked if they could check me. You can always say no to checking. I was always kind of curious where I was at, which is why I had them check me. And yes, it was painful, but I was just curious. But it is something that you can absolutely say no to, and you don't need to get checked on. And so I'm 7 centimeters dilated. I'm in a lot of pain. We call my doula. We're like, okay, it's time. So she comes at like 3 in the morning. I got on the floor, and I remember being like over the yoga ball, laboring like that for a really, really long time. Just like I had knee pads and everything. I was like totally prepared. And I'm breathing, getting hip squeezes, the fun part about pregnancy, getting sick every so often. Something else I didn't really realize might happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's all really ramping up. And so like maybe like 4:30 in the morning, I'm back in the tub. And I spent like 3 hours at 7 centimeters in the tub. Like, again, it's ramping up, but like, it's just not wanting to fully get there. And I could only say one word at a time, and that word was usually hips. And so I had my husband on one side and my doula on the other side, squeezing every time during those contractions. I remember cursing at one point. I remember like just like birthing in like silence except for breathing and saying hips, and then just at one point going, I can't do this. After probably 2 hours of laboring, like hard labor, and everybody was like, what? You've been doing this. Like, you can do this. Like, what do you mean you can't do this? You are doing it. And so, and I do remember my doula like giving me like a real nice pep talk about like, your body was meant for this. You can do this. Your body will know what to do. So it was really nice to have her there again as like another calming presence, somebody who could help squeeze the hips, somebody who
Mhm.
could kind of relieve Andrew when he needed some relief. You know what I mean? Just like having her there for all that calmness and kind of upholding the vision of birth that I had hoped for, right? Um, at one point, I remember looking up and the sun was coming out, and I was just like, no, this cannot be happening. So probably around 7:15, I asked for another cervix check, still 7 centimeters,
Oh
and I
no.
think at that point I willed myself to dilate because I was just over it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So a few minutes later, I'm like, um, I was like, I don't know, but I think I need to push. And my midwife was like, well, women always know when they need to push. And I was like, in my head, first of all, that was a weird comment because I was like, wait, but I've never done this before.
Mm.
Like, how would I know that I need to push or not? And like, they tell you what to feel for and stuff, but eventually everything just starts to kind of feel the same, right? Because you're just kind of in pain. But I was like, I kind of insisted that she check once more, and she did. And she goes, oh, all right, it's push time. So it was like literally within a couple of minutes, I was just ready to start pushing. So that must have been sometime between 7:15, 7:30, because I know I pushed for about an hour and a half in the tub, and my son was born at 9:04 in the morning.
In the water?
Yeah.
Ah.
And so I pushed for an hour and a half. I did it in multiple positions. I was floating on my back at times. I was on my hands and knees. I was kind of squatted against the wall. My favorite midwife came about an hour before Milo came out, and I was just so glad that she was there. She was the one who was able to catch him, and I was like, oh, she's here, thank goodness. She just had the best presence. Around probably 9, right before that last push, I had a contraction, and I pushed, and the baby's head was already, there, it was crowning, and she was like, okay, wait for the next push again. And I literally was like, nope, and I just pushed. Like, I don't know where this like warrior energy came from, but it came from deep within, and I was done, and I pushed him right out.
I can so relate with that. When you say warrior energy, that is exactly what it felt like, where you're like, it just like boils up and you're like, "Rah!"
Yeah, I literally was like, nope, bye. All at once.
Aw.
Um, and so, I obviously felt really relieved, and the midwife handed him to me right away, and she was like, rub him. He looks a little bit blue. And I like wasn't totally taking that in because I was just like proud and like relieved and like in awe of this tiny baby, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then they're like, okay, like I said, she has the best presence. She was like, okay, we're gonna take Milo for a second and just put him on this warming table. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like totally like in this post birth like woohoo space. I'm like, everything's good. But yeah, he was blue. He came out blue. And they just, but it only took a couple minutes to warm him back up. But like, it was just like a whoa. Looking back at it, I'm like, oh my god, I should have been like, whoa, what's going on? You know what I mean? But like, you just are totally like, I don't even know what that feeling is when your baby comes out, but it's like pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with hormones. Like, I think your adrenaline kicks in. I think there's oxytocin. There's like a whole concoction of stuff that is
Right.
flowing through your blood that acts like a drug, where you forget somehow that you were just in agonizing pain, or that you just labored for some umpteen hours of years and trillions of weeks, what it feels like, and
Exactly.
and all of a sudden, all that's there, like everything just kind of whoop, and you're
Yeah.
just like, I have a baby now. And it's this bizarre, it feels like you're on some sort of drug, but it's just your hormones that are designed to put you right into mama mode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you're a mom.
Right, exactly. It's amazing. And the other issue that was that his cry was really weak when he came out. And
Mm.
we're like, oh, that's funny. So we actually ended up having to go get him tested. He needed an MRI when he was 2 weeks old.
Oh my goodness.
And it ended up being vocal cord paralysis, but it resolved on its own. So it must have been like his positioning or something. They weren't totally sure, but it was one of those just kind of funny things.
Wow.
Um, but I just felt so grateful to the whole birth team for acting quickly, but again, not making me feel pressured. Like, you know, I think in other situations they would have given me like one or two of those interventions maybe and been like, okay, now it's time for a C-section,
Mhm.
right? So like instead of that, they're like, okay, we know that this is what you want for your goal. And of course, I came in with like three different birth plans and handed them to my birth team. So they're like, okay, but yeah. So like they know that this is my goal. They're like with me, and wanting to make it happen. And that's it. It with me. They just felt like they were with me
Yeah.
the whole
But
time.
I love that the consensus seemed to be that you're the driver, right? Like
Yeah,
you're the leader of this endeavor and they are there to help you make it happen, not to do it to you, you know?
exactly. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
really cool.
So it was a 36-hour labor technically. Didn't really feel the contractions until the last 6 hours or so. Four interventions. And at 9:04 a.m. on Christmas morning, Milo was born.
Wow.
And he ended up being the only Christmas baby at the hospital. And at that hospital, they celebrate on different occasions. So for Christmas, I guess they have the mom of a current nurse who used to be a nurse there. So she puts together these really beautiful gift baskets for people who give birth on different holidays. And so Milo got one and I got one, and it was like two homemade blankets and a onesie and a swaddle and treats and toys and like just incredible. Just felt so like supported and loved and cared for there, and it just felt so special, so special.
That's amazing. It's really inspiring because as a fairly natural minded person and you going in with this vision of how you want your birth to go. And I've talked to other moms that have had some version of this experience too, where you go in with one idea, like this is how it's gonna go, right? And then something happens because
Yeah,
parts of birth are just unexpected. No matter where, no matter how or when, things happen, and babies have their own agendas and their own schedules, and sometimes they just aren't ready, and they're not going to come until they're good and ready.
exactly.
And I think that another sort of takeaway from listening to your story is keep your head in the game and have people around you that are going to help you keep your head in the game, because I have no doubt that, and you even mentioned, like, throughout this process you had your emotional ups and downs, right? Like, I'm sure there
Yeah,
were times where you're like, I give up, like this sucks and I don't like this, and no. And you probably had somebody there, whether it's your husband or a midwife or your doula or whoever, that was there like, it's okay. Like, we've got this. Your
yeah,
vision is still your vision, and we're here to make it happen as close to that as we possibly can, right? Even if
yeah,
that ends up in a C section, which I have heard stories now where mamas end up having C sections and it still ends up being a beautiful, magical, empowering experience
right.
because they were able to keep their head in the game despite running into hurdles that take away from the original vision for the birth.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, like you said, it is just so important to have those people around you who can keep it. And I never once felt that anybody was trying to make me stray from that plan. Like it was like if they could have done it, they would have made it the exact birth that I wanted. Is the kind of the feeling I got, and I really got the birth that I wanted with a few detours. You know what I mean? Like maybe unwanted detours, but again, based on the fact that he came out the way he did, blue, and with the vocal cord paralysis, I was like, okay, I'm really glad that I did it the way that I did it,
Yeah,
and that I got to still make the decisions along the way.
that's amazing. It's an amazing birth story. It's beautiful, it's powerful. And the amazing thing about birth stories is there's no two that are alike, like I will never get bored of hearing people's birth stories because they're so different one to the next. And I always learn something, and there's always some, you know, whether it is the case that you go through your birth and you're like, I am very satisfied with how that went, or I wish I had done something different. And there's still a value in sharing it, in my opinion, because you learn, you know sometimes things don't go the way you plan, or sometimes they go exactly the way you plan, and it's just kind of, it's an adventure.
Yeah. And in becoming a doula, one of the courses I'm going to be taking is birth story medicine,
Mm.
and it's to become a birth story listener, and it's a 3-part course. And it's to be able to really hear people and their birthing stories and kind of help them to kind of pull out the different parts of it and make sense of it, make meaning from it, reframe it in ways that make them sort of understand it better. Because I feel like, well, with birth stories, I love telling my birth story. There's not always people around who want to hear it, right? Um, and I love listening to other people's birth stories, but people seem hesitant to share it also, right? And it's like this, again, shared experience, this really, really huge experience. Like, it's not nothing that so many people in our world go through, and that so many people go through and have to make different decisions than they initially thought they would have to make, right? Um, or aren't able to make decisions because things weren't in place or they didn't know they could or whatever it may be. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm actually starting the training for it this week because I think it's just going to be it's almost like becoming a part of somebody else's family for a little while, right? I plan to offer full spectrum, so I'll be with them during pregnancy, during the birth, and then a little bit postpartum, and to kind of tie that up with like now that it's been a couple months or whatever it may be, do you want to talk about your birth story, and let's see if we can kind of work through it. I think it'll just offer a lot of value to the clients. So
I think that's really cool. I've heard some birth stories where people have regrets, and while I understand that, it's a totally valid emotion and it's a totally, reasonable feeling to have depending on the experience. But I've heard people that are like, I regret having done this, or I regret not doing that, or not advocating for myself, or agreeing to that, or letting myself get whatever it is, like I have regrets. And it's valid, and I definitely understand that. But it's also important to not let that dictate your future. Like,
right.
You can feel like you did something wrong. That's okay. We all have that in some aspect of our life or another, right? But you have to be able to make peace with it and say, okay, I did what I could with the knowledge that I had in that moment.
Right.
And that's okay. And maybe the outcome was less than desirable or less than perfect or less than ideal. But you got to make peace with the fact that, any mom that's going through this, on top of her mind is her baby's health. That's the number one. Her own survival through the ordeal, right? And then everything else is secondary. And so you get thrown information, you get given all these terms, and I'll do a shameless plug at the end for my recent book where I define every term I possibly could find on the subject of birth. But like, you get told you have this, or we need to do that, or this intervention, or that complication, or this threat of some problem, and it can be really overwhelming. And so as a mom who doesn't necessarily have access to every single, concept that has something to do with her pregnancy, you make a decision based on whatever you have. And sometimes, unfortunately, that decision is based off of fear, because people say, well, if you this, then your baby is gonna that. And you go, well, crap, like, I don't want that, so I'm gonna do what you're saying. And then you come to regret it. And you have to realize that in that moment, you made the decision, the best decision that you could with the data that you had. Maybe you learn something new next time. Maybe the next time around you're going to do something different. That's totally fine. But like, don't let that dictate how you feel about your birth and your baby. Like, you may have made a mistake. Fine. Let's move forward.
Yeah. And it's your birth story. It won't change. The events that happened won't change, And so to be able to, like I said, kind of take it and reframe it in a way that feels more positive and more understanding of it is going to be the goal for that part of it. So
I love
really
that. Yeah,
it'll be really fun. But so the other part at like postpartum that I didn't feel totally prepared for was breastfeeding. I don't know how you felt about it, but I really wanted to breastfeed. And Milo came out, like I said, with a really weak cry. They were really worried about that. They didn't know what it was. I felt like that was the one part that I didn't feel totally supported with when I gave birth. because I didn't really know what to do. And I'm like, oh, he's crying. And one of the nurses is like, oh, maybe you should try to feed him. I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I should. All right. Now we have to feed this little thing. And so I tried, and it seemed like he had latched, but he was really, really upset. Like he
Mm.
just wasn't calming himself down. And again, something that they were really worried about, and they're like, well, I'm not sure. He needs to eat, basically. And so they were like, well, after, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times of trying overnight, right? Or like, it must have been more than that. I don't know how many times, but overnight, basically, that first night, trying to get him to eat, they're like, okay, he's not eating enough. He really needs to eat. And
Mm.
I'm like, oh, okay. And so, what did what did we do? I don't think it was formula. I want to say that they had other breast milk that they were able to give him. And so I was like, okay, like we'll do it that way. So like almost from day one, he's drinking from a bottle, whereas I wanted him to be breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And the lactation specialist was in there with me, and it just wasn't happening. And we later learned that he has a bit of a tongue tie. Um, and what was happening with his vocal cords could have been affecting it and things like that. But I just felt like I wish we would have slowed down a little bit and just tried something different, brought in somebody else. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't think that far in advance. I was so focused on the birth. And then that came along, and I was just like, oh, I had a little bit of education on this in my birth class, but that was really it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Trying to remember, I don't think that the class that I took barely covered breastfeeding.
Yeah.
I remember a friend had sent me a YouTube video, or I don't remember. There was something where someone was like, I don't know. I went in with the idea that like, oh, well, obviously you just put the baby to the boob and it just happens, right?
Right.
Um, and I just kind of had that assumption, and I didn't know that there could be a problem. Um, I was very blessed with my first. He latched right away, and aside from uh, very, very, very bad pain for a couple of months, which I didn't
Oh,
realize was
no.
something you could do something about. Now, okay, back to this thing of like, in retrospect, um,
Right.
there is something that can be done about that. If your latch is very painful, you
Yeah.
don't have to suffer.
No.
I didn't know that, so I just assumed that the first couple months of breastfeeding comes with your boobs falling apart and it feeling like lava. Um, that was fun, yeah, super fun. But his like he was feeding. You should see pictures of my kid when he was like a few months old. He was the chunky. He had rolls on rolls. Just he was just a little roll. So he was not. It was not for lack of uh, nutrition, but certainly I was suffering for it. And I'm like, he's healthy. I'm still alive. Although every time he would latch, I was like, oh,
Right.
every letdown. And then finally, I like mentioned it to someone. They're like, that you can like try a different position, try this. How does the areola look? And I was like, these are things I should be thinking about. It didn't even occur to me to bring it up. My midwife would even ask me, she's like, how's the breastfeeding going? I'm like, great. Because I
Yeah.
just assumed that's how it went. I didn't know that there was like a whole technology behind nursing.
Yeah.
Um, and so, that's something that I would have done differently the first time around. And when it came time for the second kid, I knew what to look for, and I knew different positions to try, and I knew how to like kind of troubleshoot things as they were going. And it was a totally different story, like very different story. So yeah, another thing is like kind of like with my first pregnancy, I didn't know what a doula was really. I thought they were, my definition was like a rich lady's hand holder during birth. It's kind of what I had come up with. I just assumed that people who had a lot of money hired somebody to be
Right.
like their like guide.
Yep.
No, a doula is something that everybody can and should have. And another thing is a lactation consultant. Like there's a
Yes.
whole field. It's not just put the baby to the boob and everything will happen. Sometimes it does happen that way. Sometimes, everybody knows what to do instinctively. Great.
Mhm.
Other times there are issues, and whether that's a problem with something that the mom's got going on, if it's nutritional, if it's the positioning, if something's going on with the baby, the lip tie, the tongue tie, like there's a whole slew of things that can be checked out and things that can be changed and worked with in order to augment your breastfeeding experience. Who knew? Like,
Well, and we were lucky because we had a lactation consultant in the midwife practice. So when I went for my first, postpartum checkup, and my midwife asked how it was going, I'm like, it's really stressful. Like I'm trying to, breastfeed, but like they didn't start really that way in the hospital, and now I'm bottle feeding and breastfeeding. She's like, why don't you go see our lactation consultant and she can help you? And so I saw her for weeks, and nipple shields helped.
mm-hmm.
Different positions kind of helped. But ultimately, it just, I never made enough anyway. And so I put myself through, I think, 2 months of trying to, how they're on like the 2-hour feeding schedule at the beginning. So like trying to feed with the breast and then feeding with the bottle while I pumped, and then like playing for a little bit, and then it would all start over again.
Man. But the other thing is like just like in labor, just like in pregnancy, like your headspace is such a huge component that when you start down this is, I'm speaking from other people's experience, but when you start down the spiral of stressing out about, I'm not making enough milk, so you're stressed out, so you're doing this, and then you're like trying to be on a schedule, and then you get more stressed out because you're not producing enough milk, and then your baby's crying, and you're not and you like just
Yeah.
and then on top of it, you're like hormones are coming down after pregnancy, which let's just like grant that the
Really.
value, like that is something. That is fourth
It is
trimester
something.
is no joke.
No, it's not. There are many a time I would just be bursting out crying for no reason.
And it's just
Or
hormones,
seemingly no
and it's a thing that happens, and your body goes through this whole massive shift, and you've got to give yourself grace in that
reason.
period. Like again, I feel like the whole theme of this entire talk is your mindset, your headspace is everything. And you need to
Yes.
surround yourself with people that are going to support you and not make you feel more stressed out. And if someone's like, "What? You're not doing this, and how are you sleeping, and how are you feeding your baby, and what are you putting on your kid, and you are swaddling, you're not swaddling," like, man, you can stress yourself out about every single thing. And what you need to do is not that. And it's easier
Right.
said than done. And I realize that completely. But this is where somebody like a doula, like a postpartum doula, also, I didn't even know that was a thing until very, very recently. But like that time can be very difficult. And so even if you didn't have a doula and you're just struggling postpartum, you can hire somebody who's been there or who's trained on this stuff, who can be there, even if all they do is just keep you sane. The amount of value that adds, and like keep you from spiraling out of control, beating
Yeah.
yourself up about every last thing, and being in like the state of confusion about what's going on. And again, some people have a postpartum that is easy peasy breezy walk in the park. Fantastic. But just know that if that's not what's going on, you have resources available to you, and you should seek them out, because you don't have to suffer, basically.
And I actually didn't have a postpartum doula. Like my doula came postpartum for a postpartum visit, but I didn't have a postpartum doula, and I really wish I did, because even with like I have a lot of family who lives out of state, but they were all coming to visit and to help out, and I just wish I had that person who like knew everything. How do I say it? Like modern, right? Like all the new modern research and things like that. You know what I mean? Because I'm like doing all this research on my own, and then I have older people from the family coming in and being like, "Oh, do it this way," and I'm like, "No, actually." So if I could have that backup, it would have been so so nice.
Yeah.
And I'm not an anxious person, but I did have some anxiety right after I had my son, and to have somebody who could be like, yeah, this is normal, and and as I'm going through it, I remember being like, I feel like there's this like want, maybe not for you, but definitely for me, there was a want to be like, well, no, I can do this on my own, like I it's my baby, I know how to do it. But really, having people around you who know what they're doing and who can validate you, and again, kind of help continue educating you, is just so important. Because,
No,
like I said, I did
I
all
agree
this
with that.
leading up to birth, And then I feel like once he was here, I was like, oh, now what? And
I
so,
am the same way. I am aggressively independent to a fault. Like that is definitely something that I actively work on. Is I'm not good at asking for help. I'm definitely like the kind of like I'm gonna do this myself. Just like grin and bear it, and just I don't know
right.
if it's my Russian genetics or something. Like tough winters and wrestling bears. I don't know. There is definitely something where I don't know. I do have a hard time showing vulnerability. And it's something that, and there's different personalities. Some people are very good at asking for help. Some people know when they can recognize when they need assistance and they can ask for it. Others are like us. And I guess I would say to that mama watching, if you're looking for permission to take a moment and be vulnerable, this is the moment, and it's not for you. It's for your baby. Your baby needs you in the best shape you can be, not just physically. Obviously, take care of yourself physically, feed yourself, give yourself good nutrition, get some fresh air. Those things are important. But your mental and spiritual state as a mom is not just for your own sake. Your baby needs you in the best condition possible. And so if you're not going to do it for yourself, fine. Totally fine. I understand. Do it for your baby. If you feel like you're just exhausted or you're mentally unable to carry the burden, do ask for help and do it for your baby. And it's the other thing is like maybe even if you have a super supportive husband, your husband is also going through something very new. This is all very fresh for a first-time mom, for first-time parents. It's not easy on this first-time dad either. Like they're having to learn, how to dad. That's a big thing. They didn't have 9 months of like physical attachment to this baby, so that all comes like it's really fresh, and they're tired, and they're trying to learn how to change diapers and feed baby, and they're having to try to help you, and they've never been through what you're going through, so like that's a whole mental thing. Like it's okay, go find yourself a postpartum doula. You're not going to regret it if that's what you need.
I'll just add to that that it can be on your terms too. Like the doula's not going to come and take away your baby. You know what I mean? Like if you want that, they won't take it away, but they'll hold the baby for you and take care of the baby while you do other things. Or you can hold the baby and they can help around the house. You know what I mean? It can be on your terms whether you ask a postpartum doula for help or friends and family. You can advocate that for yourself because everybody needs something different. You know what I
Agreed.
mean? Not everybody needs like a spa day. Some people just need like a 30-minute bath
Yeah,
and
or a
then they
nap.
feel a little bit better. Or a nap. Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe like if you're me, like I don't like other people cleaning my house, so I was like I want to go do my dishes. Like
Yeah, me
I just
too.
want to feel in control of my environment, like and I felt like I was losing that because suddenly there's this tiny little thing that needs all my attention 24/7, and I'm like how am I supposed to do anything?
Yeah, I felt like we always like gave our son to our family and like ran away. We're like, okay, we got to do 1,000 things that we haven't been able to do.
Yeah. Well, somehow we gabbed for an hour.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm very excited. You're going to be an amazing doula. I can't wait for you to get your certification. When you do, you'll have to let me know. And after a couple of births, maybe I'll have you back on the podcast, and you can spread the word about what area you're serving and what your openings are and so forth, and shamelessly promote your own your stuff.
That sounds awesome.
But this
Thank
has
you.
been amazing. Oh, wait, as promised, I am going to shamelessly plug the Sensible Mamas Glossary. This is a glossary of all things birth. Everything from, the anatomy having to do with childbirth to interventions that you may be, tossed by your OB, different words that they throw at you like failure to progress in your labor, which sounds very scary, or failure to thrive. If your baby has failure to thrive, very scary. I tried to put everything. Obviously I am a person. I am a human. I wrote this book, and I may have missed a word here and there, but it is many pages. lots and lots of words. My goal is that you can take this with you to your OB appointment. So when they say, hey, you have this, or you should consider that, or this part of your body is doing that thing, you can look it up. It's written in a very calm, you don't need a medical degree to understand the words. And hopefully that helps some mamas out there. So that's available on Amazon. If you look up Sensible Mama's Glossary on Amazon, I'll put a link to it in the description too, so you can find it. If there's anything else you want to share in closing, we're just about ready to wrap.
I just want to say thank you for having me today. It was really nice to say my birth story to people who want to hear it.
Absolutely. We'll have you back on again, okay?
Thank you.
All right, bye everyone. I'll see you in the next episode.